Imagine you're walking through San Francisco on a quiet September morning in 1950. The fog rolls in from the bay, thick and familiar. You breathe it in without thinking. Everyone does. But this fog is different. Somewhere out in the water, a U.S. Navy minesweeper is pumping millions of bacterial particles into the air. Particles aimed directly at you, your family, and nearly 800,000 unsuspecting civilians. You were never asked. You were never told. And when people started dying, no one said a word. For 27 years, this operation didn't exist. There were no records, no admissions, no apologies. The United States military had turned one of America's most iconic cities into an open-air biological weapons laboratory, and the people who lived there, they were the test subjects. This is Operation Sea Spray, and the documents that prove it were buried until 1977. To understand why the U.S. Army would spray bacteria over its own citizens, you have to understand the fear that consumed Washington in the late 1940s. World War II had just ended, but a new kind of war was already beginning. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb in August 1949, years ahead of Western predictions. The Communist Revolution in China had succeeded, and American intelligence agencies were convinced that the next great threat would come from biological weapons. The fear was not unfounded. During the war, Japan's Unit 731 had conducted horrific biological experiments on prisoners and deployed plague-carrying fleas against Chinese cities. The U.S. knew this because in a deeply controversial deal, they had granted immunity to Unit 731's leaders in exchange for their research data. America didn't prosecute these war criminals, they hired them. By 1949, the Pentagon's Chemical Corps was tasked with a question that should have been unthinkable. How vulnerable were American cities to a biological attack? The generals didn't want theoretical answers, they wanted proof. And so they designed a series of secret tests, over 200 of them across the country over the next 2 decades, using real cities and real people. San Francisco was chosen as the first major target. Its fog, its wind patterns, its dense population, and its bay made it the perfect proving ground. The bacteria they selected was called Serratia marcescens. Military scientists considered it harmless. They were wrong. On September 20th, 1950, a U.S. Navy minesweeper sailed quietly into San Francisco Bay under cover of darkness. On its deck, technicians operated large hose systems that sprayed a fine mist of Serratia marcescens into the offshore wind. Over the next 6 days, the ship conducted multiple spraying runs. Military estimates later revealed that the operation released enough bacteria to ensure that nearly every single one of San Francisco's 800,000 residents inhaled at least 5,000 particles. The entire city had been dosed. Within days of the spraying, 11 patients were admitted to Stanford University Hospital with severe urinary tract infections caused by a pathogen the hospital had rarely seen, Serratia marcescens, the same bacterium the Navy had just sprayed across the city. One of those patients was Edward Nevin, a retired pipe fitter recovering from routine prostate surgery. The Serratia invaded his bloodstream. His heart valves became infected. On October 11, 1950, Edward Nevin died. The doctors at Stanford were baffled. They published a medical paper about this bizarre cluster of infections. They had no idea the U.S. government was responsible, and the military, they knew. Internal documents declassified decades later show that Army scientists were aware of the hospital infections. They noted the outbreak in their files. But they did not alert the doctors. They did not contact the hospital. They did not stop the program. In fact, they expanded it. Over the next 20 years, the Army conducted similar tests in New York City, releasing bacteria into the subway system during rush hour. They sprayed bacteria along the coastlines of Virginia and South Carolina. They tested in Minneapolis, St. Louis, and dozens of other locations. The American public was, without their knowledge or consent, the largest biological weapons test population in history. Operation Sea Spray remained completely classified until 1977, When it was exposed during Senate hearings investigating CIA and military intelligence abuses, the same hearings that revealed MK Ultra. When confronted, military officials did not deny the operation. Instead, they offered a carefully framed explanation. The Army maintained that Serratia marcescens was a simulant, a harmless stand-in for more dangerous pathogens. They argued it was universally considered safe at the time, and that the tests were essential to understanding America's vulnerability to Soviet biological attack. The death of Edward Nevin, they said, was an unforeseeable tragedy. The man was already ill. His immune system was compromised. The infection could have come from anywhere. The Nevin family sued the U.S. government. In 1981, a federal judge dismissed the case, ruling that the government was protected by sovereign immunity. The family received nothing. No one was ever held accountable. But the official story raises far more questions than it answers. According to declassified documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, the open-air biological tests didn't end in the 1950s. They continued through the 1960s and into the early 1970s, well past the point when the medical community had conclusively demonstrated that Serratia marcescens could cause serious infections and death. Some researchers claim the military knew the bacteria were dangerous from the beginning and conducted the tests anyway. Dr. Leonard Cole, a political scientist at Rutgers University, documented over 200 secret open-air tests in his book, Clouds of Secrecy. In one notorious 1966 test, Army scientists dropped light bulbs filled with bacteria into the New York City subway system during rush hour. Within minutes, the bacteria had traveled through the entire network, inhaled by over 1 million commuters. Some investigators have drawn connections between these programs and the broader biological warfare infrastructure maintained at Fort Detrick in Maryland, the same facility later linked to the 2001 anthrax attacks. The deeper question is not whether Operation Sea Spray happened. We know it did. The question is, what else happened that we still don't know about? How many tests remain classified? And if the government was willing to expose its own citizens to biological agents in peacetime, what limits, if any, actually existed? How does something like this happen? How do hundreds of scientists, military officers, and government officials participate in a program that deliberately exposes civilians to biological agents, and not one of them blows the whistle for 27 years? The answer lies in one of psychology's most disturbing findings: obedience to authority. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted his famous experiment at Yale. Ordinary people were instructed by a researcher to administer what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to another person. 65% of participants delivered the maximum voltage, enough to kill, simply because an authority figure told them to continue. Milgram called this an agentic shift, when individuals stop seeing themselves as responsible moral agents and become instruments of a higher authority. The Navy technicians on that minesweeper didn't think of themselves as poisoning a city. They were following orders. The scientists didn't think of themselves as endangering lives. They were conducting research. The generals didn't think of themselves as violating the social contract. They were protecting national security. This is compounded by diffusion of responsibility. When everyone is responsible, no one is. Each person saw only their small piece of the operation. No single individual felt the full moral weight of what they were collectively doing. And so a democratic government sprayed its own people with bacteria, and the system worked exactly as designed, efficiently, quietly, and without conscience. Operation Sea Spray is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented, declassified, legally adjudicated fact. The United States Army sprayed bacteria over San Francisco. People got sick. At least one man died. And for 27 years, the government denied everything. What makes this story so unsettling isn't just what happened. It's what it reveals about the relationship between a government and its people. The same institution that was supposed to protect Edward Nevin and the residents of San Francisco turned them into unwitting laboratory subjects. And when the truth finally came out, the legal system shielded those responsible from consequences. We know about Operation Sea Spray only because of congressional hearings and declassified documents. But declassification is selective. It reveals what those in power choose to reveal on their timeline under their conditions. If this is what they've admitted to, what haven't they admitted to? What do you think caused the Tanganyika laughing epidemic? Mass hysteria? Colonial chemical experiments? Something we still don't have a name for? Let me know in the comments. And if this story shook something loose in you, subscribe, because we're just getting started.